In the rugged heart of New Mexico, an aging rancher buys the freedom of two young Apache women, never expecting they'd capture his heart. Love, sacrifice, and the untamed frontier collide in this unforgettable tale. Like, share, and subscribe for more Wild West frontier you won't soon forget. Eli Carter had always been a man of few words. On the dry outskirts of New Mexico, where the sun baked the earth and the wind carried whispers of forgotten lives, people respected him for his quiet strength. He had worked the land alone for nearly 20 years, ever since losing his family to sickness, and though his hands were hardened and his face weathered by the desert, his heart remained tender. Folks in town often said Eli didn't have much, but whatever he had, he'd give without hesitation. And that night at the trading post, that truth would alter his life forever. The trading post was more crowded than usual that day, full of drifters, cattlemen, and merchants passing through. Eli had only gone in to swap some hides for flour and coffee, but then he heard the rough voice of a man boasting about buying help for his spread. Eli turned his head just enough to see two young Apache women, their wrists loosely tied with rope, standing silently in the corner. Their eyes were lowered, but their faces held quiet strength, and something else Eli knew too well: fear. The man arranging the deal was infamous around town for his cruelty. He'd broken more than a few men his time, and Eli knew what fate awaited those women if nobody stepped in. He didn't pause, didn't calculate the risks, or wonder what folks might think. He just acted with a calm but steady tone. He offered every coin he owned, nearly all of his savings, to purchase their freedom. The room fell silent, and for a moment it felt like every eye in the post was on him. The man sneered but took the money, tossing the ropes at Eli before storming out, muttering about a fool wasting gold. Eli said little as they walked back to his lonely ranch. He didn't ask their names, didn't press about where they had come from or what horrors they had endured. He simply told them they were safe now, and they could stay as long as they wished. At first, the silence between them was heavy. The women, Ahyoka and Nayeli, kept close to one another, speaking softly in their own language and watching Eli with suspicion, unsure if his kindness had some other price. But Eli never crossed a line. He showed them the well, the feed shed, and the small herd of cattle. Then he stepped aside, giving them space to breathe. Days slipped into weeks, and slowly the ranch began to feel different. Ahyoka, the elder, had a sharp eye for order and routine. She tidied the cabin, mended tools, and worked with quiet efficiency that impressed Eli. Nayeli, younger and full of restless energy, bonded with the horses, brushing their coats and whispering to them as though they were old friends. Eli observed from a distance. He noticed everything: the way Ahyoka's serious expression softened when she thought no one was looking, or how Nellie laughed when a colt nibbled playfully at her braid. One afternoon, Eli returned from repairing a fence to find supper waiting on the table. Nothing fancy, just beans, cornbread, and coffee. But it was the first warm meal anyone had cooked for him in years. He didn't know what to say, so he simply nodded. Inside, though, something shifted. For the first time in decades, the silence in his home didn't feel empty. It felt alive. As the summer stretched on, life on the ranch settled into a steady rhythm. They worked side by side from sunrise to dusk, their days filled with chores and quiet words. Ahyoka practiced more English each week, while Nayeli hummed soft tunes as she worked, her voice drifting sweetly over the fields. Eli found himself listening, not just to the music, but to the way it smoothed the edges of his loneliness. One evening, a desert storm swept in, lightning slashing across the sky. The three huddled together inside, the cabin trembling with the thunder. In that moment, as Nayeli laughed nervously and Ahyoka soothed her in Apache, Eli felt something he hadn't allowed himself in years: a sense of belonging. Gratitude came not in words, but in gestures. Ahyoka began setting aside portions of food for Eli before serving herself and her sister. Nayeli started leaving wildflowers on the porch each morning, never mentioning them. These simple acts spoke louder than speech, chipping away at the walls Eli had long built around his heart. He told himself he was too old for such feelings, too worn down for anything beyond friendship. But when he caught Ahyoka's shy smile across the corral or heard Nayeli's bright laugh at one of his rare jokes, his chest ached in a way he couldn't ignore. By late summer, The ranch thrived more than it had in years. The horses were healthy. The small garden grew strong, and the cabin no longer echoed with sorrow but rang with warmth. Folks in town still whispered when they saw Eli with the two women, but he paid no heed. He hadn't saved them out of pity or loneliness. He did it because it was right. What he hadn't expected was how much they would end up saving him. Some nights, beneath the endless sweep of stars, Eli would sit on the porch, hat in hand, watching the women laugh together by the fence. In those quiet moments, he realized his heart was beating again. By the end of that summer, the ranch was no longer a place of silence, but a home filled with life. The women trusted him now, their laughter and voices carrying across the land. Eli found himself wrestling with emotions he wasn't sure he had the right to feel. Ahyoka, with her steady calm, grounded him. Nayeli, with her brightness, reminded him of youth long lost. He convinced himself it was only gratitude, until the night everything changed. After a long day mending fences, the three sat on the porch, coffee in hand, the stars glowing above. Ahyoka spoke first, her voice steady, telling Eli that she and Nayeli had talked, and they didn't just feel safe with him. They cared for him deeply. Eli sat frozen, the words sinking in. Before he could answer, Nayeli touched his arm gently. "You gave us freedom," she whispered, "but you also gave us a home. We want to stay with you." From that night on, love didn't need declarations. It lived in small things. Ahyoka brushing dust off Eli's hat, Nayeli riding beside him during cattle drives, laughter trailing behind her. Together they built something solid, something whole. The town's gossip grew louder, some calling it scandal. But Eli no longer cared. Slowly, people began to see the quiet dignity in the way the three treated each other, and the whispers faded. Winter came early that year, blanketing the ranch in snow. The cold pushed them closer, nights spent around the fire sharing stories. Ahyoka taught Eli Apache words, corrected his clumsy tongue, while Nayeli teased him with laughter. In those nights, Eli realized love didn't have to be dramatic. It could be steady like the crackle of fire or constant like the stars. When spring returned, so did life. Together they planted, rebuilt, and raised colts. Eli often stopped mid-task just to watch the women, Ahyoka with her calm strength, Nayeli with her laughter, and each time gratitude swelled in him. There was no denying it anymore. They were partners at work, in life, in love, three broken souls who had found healing in each other. The years passed, and their bond only deepened. They faced hardship, droughts, harsh winters, disputes with neighbors, but they faced them together, and every night, Eli would sit on the porch between the two women, looking up at the stars, thankful for the chance twist of fate that had brought them into his life. Perhaps someday, people would remember him as the old cowboy who bought two women only to find love. Some might judge, others might understand, but none of that mattered. What mattered was this. In a land as wild and unforgiving as the West, they had carved out a home where love could grow. And every night, as the desert cooled and the wind whispered across the plains, Eli Carter silently thanked the day he met Ahyoka and Nayeli. Because love wasn't just something he stumbled upon. It was something they built together, piece by piece, in a land where nothing had ever come easy.